All right. Hey, why do so many successful founders hit a wall after they've already made it? Today's guest, Jaclyn Orent, studies what she calls the achiever's dilemma, the moment when external success stops creating internal fulfillment. See, she's trained under thinkers like Benjamin Hardy, Richard Boyatzis, and work of Dr. David Hawkins. She helps founders evolve from simply building companies to becoming cultural catalysts. Welcome to the Go4CEO channel, Jaclyn. How are you?
Thanks. I love hearing that. It makes me light up.
Awesome, awesome. Well, you are a ball of energy. I love it. I love the pace that you speak at. As we were offline sharing with you, I was trying to make sure I really, really connected to the words that you were saying and the energy that you said explicitly that we give off of each other, and I love it. So excited to have you on. You know, we typically start with, hey, what is the origin, the ideation, the cultural catalyst? Where did this come from? And do you have a do you have a corporate background? Are you been an entrepreneur all your life? Like, or do you have family stuff? So take it away and share with us a little bit of that story, and then we'll get into the rest of the business.
Yeah, totally. Well, I have a very long and extensive story, so I'll just start with the main bullet points that are most important. But I left corporate America nearly a decade ago to figure out, who it was that I am and what is it that I was here for, basically. And this led to a very transformational journey, and ultimately had me find certain people and certain experiences along the way that basically informed me that the way that leadership is currently expressed is actually outdated based off of what the physics is actually sharing with us. And I'll give a little bit of an example. I was leaving sales leadership position because I realized it wasn't my life's work after like nearly 20 years in sales. And being like, this isn't it. Like, I love what we're doing and I'm really good at it, but this wasn't it for me. And that got me to work with a multi-business founder and lead an intervention for him at a time that his team was walking out on him. And the results of that experience with him literally changed the trajectory of my entire life. So much so that led me to apply to the most innovative university in the entire world called Minerva University with a very specific thesis in which I wanted to connect consciousness, the science of consciousness that Dr. David Hawkins studied, and actually connect that to systemic change. And what I was seeing was the way that we were developing our leaders was backwards. It was based off of only causality, which means this causes this. But there's a greater reality available to us that the mind might not even able to see necessarily, that isn't actually looking at the entire context of, how does systemic change really happen? It's nonlinear, first of all, and it's can be completely random. It's called something called chaos theory. That has changed us moving from Newtonian physics to what's literally metaphysics. That our essence, our beingness can cause a reality that's beyond what we can necessarily track. And that thesis actually got me to meet a number of really important people that you just mentioned. I got to meet Richard E. Boyatzis, who is a Case Western University researcher. He's a Harvard University graduate. And he's been studying change for the last 60 years of how does change happen from the individual to the organization to the community level. And there's a lot of research on organizational psychology, but less research on actual how does like cultural change happen, but that's what he's been studying for the last 60 years. And then I actually got to meet Dr. Benjamin Hardy too, both of which read my thesis and they directed me in very specific directions, basically. And so I realized after having conversations with both of them that I didn't need to go to grad school to study this, that the research already existed actually for
Hmm.
how does consciousness actually create systemic change, right? There's he applied scientific rigor to consciousness. And he already proved that specific thing, and I can give you specific examples. And then Boyatzis is like, what are the mechanics of this change? Like, how does it happen on the from the individual to the dyad to the team to the organization to the community to the global processes in the country level, right? How does that happen? And then Ben is like, how do we scale it exponentially and incrementally? And so what I did was I decided to just integrate all these different three systems because I really wanted to create my own leadership system. I wanted to create a new system. And I think we're at a time in a culture, listening to Ray Dalio yesterday of the changing world
Mm.
order, that macroeconomist, and being like, yeah, we are at the change point right now of we are literally in a position that we're going to need to develop, and we're going to need to create, and we're going to get to design a new culture. And people who are in leadership positions are the people who have the authority, they have the influence, they have the teams, they have the resources, and they have the capacity to actually be part of that, which is what I'm so excited about, that we actually get to redesign our systems, our structures, and our culture together consciously.
Hmm. Well, that was deep. You got me thinking of a lot of stuff, a lot of things that I on my personal life probably battle with. And Go4CEO community, I'm sure listening into that beginning monologue that Jaclyn just shared, I hope made you think or like kind of ponder like, all right, this is really interesting stuff, especially with, the technology that's thriving, this new era. I feel like it's the new internet boom, but it's called the AI boom right now. And
Yeah.
and all these things that are going on. So it's really interesting 26 years later, because I remember 1999 like it was yesterday, and the whole internet boom and what was going on, and how certain companies didn't even want to have a website because they didn't believe in it and all that type of stuff. So, um, but interesting. Okay, so look, you have a corporate career, you're in sales, and sales are unique in and of themselves, right? The average human, they say, right, needs to be connected with, touched in certain ways 8 times to even know, like, and trust you, right? To even have a feeling that, hey, whatever you're pitching, I kind of like Jaclyn, I like John, whatever, that
Yeah.
type of thing. So, is there anything of that you brought into this? Are you truly feeling like, hey, this business has been a complete 180 for you and you're a brand new person?
Yeah, so it's funny, after getting given, so when I talked to Dr. Benjamin Hardy about this, I literally gave him my thesis. He read my outcomes, he read my theory, and he did all that type of stuff. And then he was like, whatever you need, I got you. Okay. Because I literally got to him and was like, I think you're my super who, to the guy who wrote a book about super who's. And he just asked me why, and I explained to him why. And at the end of our conversation, he literally told me not to read any of his other books besides The Science of Scaling. And that's his newest book that he just released. And I went home and I gave The Science of Scaling to my business partner, and I had her go through the process, and then she led me through the process, which ultimately led me to let go of grad school. Okay. Part of that process is using time as a tool to actually, realize that we might be optimizing for things that shouldn't exist. And so that was my first use of the scaling science. I went from, thinking I was going to go to grad school to not going to grad school and actually creating my own system and integrating the three sciences, right? That was the first transformational process that we actually went through in using that specific science. And then using the scaling science again, because I'm in study of it right now. I went from part of the scaling sciences to actually build something that is scalable. We have to make sure that's not about us, right? Like we can't be the queen or the king of our kingdom and have 45 million helpers. That's all dependent on our time. That won't work. It's literally what's called a crux. It's the issue that's going to prevent you from scaling. And so to be able to make a scalable model, you have to build something that's greater than yourself, that's not dependent on you. And for me, I've, in the last decade after leading corporate culture, and I've worked back in corporate culture, but more in like the purpose side of corporate culture since then, and then leaving it, I've been an executive coach for nearly a decade now. And, for me, it was really hard to let go of the part of me that was like, I'm the one that's delivering the results. Like you have to have time with me to deliver the results to receive the most exponential results. Um, and that was, I had multiple weeks of like emotional turmoil of that specifically because I've come to really, pride myself in the results that I've been able to provide for my clients. And at the same time, on the other side of letting that go and actually realizing that we can build a system that actually creates that exponential results. And specifically, you mentioned Boyatzis earlier. One of the things that Boyatzis says is in what creates that cultural change, right? As cultural catalysts for people who are just hearing that for their first time, they're like, wait a second, like that right there. Like I've never heard that term right there, but like that is totally me. And first of all, we've designed the system to do that. We've designed the
Mhm.
system to be an identity-based membership where people opt in or opt out. And that's scientifically backed. We're not going to go into that right now. We can if you want to, but we're just going to skip ahead a little bit. One of the things that's required to actually create change all throughout the entire system, from the individual all the way up to the country level, is something called resonant relationships. And resonant relationships are dictated by three things: shared vision, which, my dad's a New York everything fan. So it's like New York Giants. We got the Nets. We got the Rangers. He's also an IU Hoosier. So like when he meets people, he's like filtering for like, are you on any of my teams, basically? And if you
Hmm.
are, like you get automatic resonance with my father. And if you don't, you probably get shit for being a Red Sox fan, like no doubt, right? And that's what shared vision is. And then the second thing is shared compassion, that we can have compassion for our hardships, our challenges, our struggles, our breakthroughs, because we have similar level of competence, right? An eight-figure founder is very different than someone who runs a six-figure business. Literally different competencies, right? It's going to be hard to have compassion for people if you don't have similar levels of competencies. And then the third thing is shared energy, right? We activate each other, we fuel each other. Having the right peers around us is like going to the gas station so we can keep going to where we're going. And I think the biggest issue that we have in this age of AI and tech everything is that our actual relationships is actually the fuel, it's the engine for us to be able to sustain our desired change processes. So when it comes to, being a cultural catalyst in this specific situation, what we talk about is that having the right peers are what's called the non-negotiable infrastructure that are actually physiologically and neurologically essential. Like your body will not be able to continue your change efforts if you are not around the right people. And that's what we're proposing here. We're taking the research, we're giving it to people who are in positions who are at a point where they're like, this place is sick. Everyone's divided. This isn't working. Our nature, there's not enough rain. There's all these issues right now, and all this stuff has happened in history before, right? And we can either be part of the solution or we can be part of the problem.
It makes me think, right? It could be in five different ways, right? Like I talk about in my book, faith, family, fitness, finance, and fun, right? So, if you take what you're talking about and compartmentalize it, right, it could be very separatist, right, in the sense of that, hey, I'm choosing this team, like you just said, and
Yep.
A Red Sox fan and a Yankees fan, it just doesn't work to
No.
to have that type of conversation, right? But could you find intricacies inside that? The love of baseball,
Yep.
could be one thing, right? Even though it's opposite teams. But so it's interesting, right? You're in this foundational moment, right? Off camera, we said that, or you said that you were about to launch the Cultural Catalyst.
Yep.
Kind of it sounded like a peer group per se.
Yep.
And forgive me if I'm mistaken it, but so the business itself has now had its foundation with
Mhm.
your own competency growth and the things that you've studied
Yeah.
under. So the actual business, is it bringing together some cultivated, very vetted CEOs and founders, and now you're putting them into categories and making sure that they have what you would seem to have been able to solve is a very cultivated group, right, to move
Yes.
forward? Okay.
Yeah.
Can you
Yeah.
explain more of that then, or?
Yeah, so one of the first principles of how change science works is that we have to connect to an ideal vision of ourself, right? When we set goals, it's not just from this like random place, it's actually based off who we want to be. And the
Hmm.
same thing happens in groups, right? Exactly. Like the Giants, there's a collective shared vision of winning as a Giants fan, right? And say the same thing happens for cultural catalysts. So the two main factors that actually create change throughout the factor throughout the fractal are two things. It's the resonant relationships and then the social identity group. Okay, so the social identity group is where you have that shared collective vision, values, purpose, dreams. Okay, and that's what cultural catalyst is meant to do. For some people who are listening to this, and again, they're like, oh my God, like no one's given me an identity like that until now, right? And that's a lot of the problem that we're running into. And part of the reason we created this was that the masterminds and the social networks that already existed were primarily for business, right? Or primarily for personal development. And it didn't meet the needs of people who are actually wanting to change the world, right? Those
Hmm.
things were separate. And yes, there's entrepreneurial conscious groups but they're still not integrating the cultural desires in there. And so this program was actually created based off of real clients' needs. A long-term client of mine who's gotten to the top of where she's at, and she's primarily surrounded by mentees, employees, contractors, and the peers that are around her aren't even lighting her up anymore, which, hearing from her how heartbreaking that is, because those people are the people that got her where she is. It just shows you, and we got to see in real time that there was this desire for real peer friendship, right? And the science actually validates that as true. right? That's what I was talking about earlier, is like it is a physiological and neurological need to be around the right people so that you can actualize your dreams, so that you can make the impact that you want to make, so that you can become who you want to be, and that you can really live out your full potential. And so what we've created is taking out of a real-time experience of what's needed and applying the science and creating an environment for those people to be together. And you're correct, it's extremely vetted. There's multiple processes of being vetted. And the most similar thing that we found available, YPO, right? Young Presidents Organization, has been around for 50 plus years. It's a peer organization, right? It's the same idea. You have to have, there's very specific metrics to be able to get in, for them to even have a conversation with you. And the reason is because they want there to be shared competency, right? That shared compassion that can come. But there's no shared vision with being a young president organization, right? Their whole thing is about creating extraordinary leaders that change the world, but the title doesn't do that, right? There's not, like, when I hear it, there's not this like dream that comes from hearing it. And so Cultural Catalyst was specifically created to make it so that whoever wants to be a cultural catalyst can be around other people who want to be cultural catalysts. And those relationships are actually what create the change. It's actually what sustains the change. And Hardy's perspective is that could even be the difference between you 10xing or more, right? Is
Hmm.
actually being around the right people.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, a couple weeks ago, I was a part of a CFO mastermind group that this gentleman's put together, and he's never been a CFO, but his way of leading the group has brought together 15, 20, I think it's, 25 CFOs of small to medium-sized businesses between 10 and let's say 50 million. And it was interesting to kind of see as a guest, the format that they use. They do a lot of EOS type stuff that are
Yep.
implemented into it. There's some structure and stuff like that, but it was interesting. Yeah, there's definitely from that specific group that I was in, I could honestly say, like, yeah, there was no cultural catalyst conversation, right?
Yeah.
Or that part of it. So, all right, let's get into, from our community, we always love kind of hearing, all right, the ideation, the
Yep.
background, all right, the steps that are going on. So from a perspective of now, how did you start to put together the list of these vetted individuals? I know that you've mentioned this particular
Yeah. Yeah.
client that has had some impact on your life and you vice versa to her. But
Yeah.
did you start with her as kind of the first example and then maybe market through her network, or what
Yeah.
were you doing to build this first cohort?
Well, it's interesting. The way that I approach reality is a little bit different than other people approach reality. And part of it is, my background consists of learning transformation and consciousness. It's part of my journey that got me to where I am right now.
Hmm.
And one of the things that has been really important to me is like, what is reality telling me? What is it that is unfolding in front of me? And what is it trying to tell me, right? And there's a specific body of work that I study from Michael Singer, a best-selling author of The Untethered Soul, specifically in the surrender experiment, who basically, what the science says about that is it takes 180 billion years for something to happen. And then here we are thinking we know what's best. Okay. And so oftentimes in entrepreneurial world, you have to like decide your ideal client and then, pursue your ideal client. And that's not really how I went about this. I was mostly asking, who is it that life is wanting me to serve? Is more of the question.
All right.
And I kept asking. Okay, so for example, we were out on Cape Cod this past summer, and I was out sailing in the morning. I'm so lucky that I get the chance to go out on this little tiny sailboat, but it's just like a way to connect with something higher out in the middle of the ocean. There's really not much out there except you and sky and the water, right? And I'm like, who is it? Who is it that you want us to serve? And then life showed me directly an eight-figure founder, whom of which I randomly ended up at her house a couple years ago through synchronicity. Like literally was living in a mold exposed house and I ended up her house. I could never have planned it. And that's what I want to speak to. I could never have planned that I would end up at her house. I could never have planned that it would have been her that life was wanting me to serve specifically. And throughout this whole process, as we've been building the marketing this and the sales infrastructure and the legal infrastructure and putting all the systems in place to actually be able to receive and be able to deliver what it is that we're creating right now, I kept asking this question. I was like, who is it that you're wanting me to serve? And it kept bringing me back to her over and over and over again. And over this time period, it's funny, we've gotten to receive her mentorship as well. and getting into actually getting to know this person and where they actually are right now. And that's where we come to this like achiever's dilemma. It's like this person's already set out to achieve what they're wanting to achieve. So setting an income goal or revenue goal and even impact goal with a 10x of their current revenue at $13 million isn't enough to make them scale again, right?
Hmm.
And I see that with my other client too. It's like that's not enough, right? And it's funny too, is for people who've already done the impossible, um, you know, that's not necessarily the aspect that's driving them. And so what I've been getting to do is actually integrate what is the scaling science telling us, and then actually get to see it in real time with Tony Robbins, who coached Hermosi last week. There has to be
Hmm.
an emotionally compelling reason for them to do it, right? And part of it is like when we actually have gotten to know this person, there's a specific archetype that's this specific person represents, right? They are modeling a new type of business. They are modeling transparent leadership. They're role modeling, having hard conversations and being able to maintain integrity with people on their team. They're role modeling a different way of doing things, right? I got asked on a podcast a couple weeks ago, where do you see this going in 10 years from now? And I said, you're about to see a new type of leadership. That's not even under the conscious leadership thing that Mackey released. This is something that your brain might not even know what it looks like right now. And that's what we're doing is we're getting a chance to create a new paradigm. And there's been people who have been in this new paradigm that they have had to become something new in the creation of what it is that they've built. And now at this next phase, they're welcome to just keep coasting. And that's what we got to see in her. She was like, well, it's easy, right? There's a part of me that doesn't want to make it hard. And she's worked her butt off to make it easy and enjoyable, but she also is a little bit bored, right? So when comes to setting new goals, it might require them to redefine who they are and what their focus is. And in her case, it was sell 80% of her parent companies. For her to 10x her next impact goal, it was completely different. And so that's what Cultural Catalyst is for. It's for people. We're starting at the top of the pyramid, kind of like Elon did with the high level Tesla before we go to the mid tier and the low tier.
Hmm.
And for people who are in positions of great power to make huge amounts of change, because the person that she's become on the other side of this, what she's wanting to release right now, it doesn't make logical sense, right? And so it's a perfect example of the environment that she's in. Her lieutenants, her like C-level people, they are helping her keep her where she is, right? But what's lighting her up is not that anymore. So we're seeing in real time the need to be able to put her into an environment with different people that call forth that next iteration out of her and actually help sustain that change effort, actually make that change effort fun, and actually get to do it together. And we got to see in real time, when we're talking to these clients, is these people aren't just focused on making money, even though that's a part of it. They're actually wanting to change the world. And so that's why Cultural Catalyst was founded. And one of the reasons that I know that it's already taking off, because when I introduce myself as a cultural catalyst, it lights people up. They hear it and they're like, I didn't even know that was a thing until now, but like, so am I. And it's going to be a movement because there's an identification with an identity that people want to be. Up until now, people haven't had that identity to aspire to. And that aspirational vision of self is actually what instigates a change process. So for people who've already achieved what they've set out to achieve, just asking for more isn't necessarily the answer. And sometimes it's not even in their business. Sometimes it's in their personal life where they're like, I can impact 5 million people, no problem. But like me finding a partner, that's like practically impossible, right? So there's a real aspect of addressing like the whole person. And one of the people that I study with, John and Missy Butcher of the founders of Lifebook, is all the life categories in our life are interconnected. So a win in love could literally affect your ability to 10x your impact in some way, right?
Hmm.
Imagine being around a different person that makes you think differently, that makes you ask different things of yourself, that gets you into around different people, right? So, I think we really got to open up our mind to, when it comes to creating a new culture right now, it is, yes, business is a vehicle to do that. And, we are humans. And so there are other parts of our life that need to be addressed so that we can make sure that we can actualize our full potential and that we're resourced enough so that we can go out there and do the hardship of creating something new when the system is designed to protect itself.
Hmm. Gosh, man, it's such a different direction of what my usual podcast. But I love that it's talking about this area because I follow Patrick Bet David, Andy Frisella, who the Real AF. He built $100 million supplements company called First Form and some other things. And he actually just came out with an app that's completely kind of designed in a framework of it's called the operator system. So I think actually you should be on his podcast. This is it's an amazing connection and twist in it. I don't know if there's a synergy there, but it's interesting to kind of hear. So obviously from a Go4CEO perspective, we're always looking for that founder that is doing some things a little bit differently, that's sharing their story in a different way. And that's what you've done right now in this conversation and kind of enlightening a different aspect of it. A paradigm shift is hard because it's a 180, right? Like it's something that you didn't even think about. Like you said, when you introduce yourself as this cultural catalyst, people are lighting up and going, "Oh, wait, I'm that," right? And they had never heard it before. So from a marketing perspective, are you, kind of continuing the conversation from where you were at with this lady and the change that you've made with her and being her kind of, what do they call the Sherpa, right? The person that goes up the mountain with you. Like
Yeah.
it seems like she's had her success, but based on your time and energy and things that you've been able to do in your learning competency that you've brought her along with, right? So marketing this cultural catalyst, and I think you said you have a partner in this business.
Yeah.
What does that look like over the next 6-12 months of the cohort? And then will you have, a certain limit amount of people that can be in it, and then you want to
Yeah.
keep it at a certain size and maybe even the fee-based structure you can go over?
Totally based. So a little bit about the marketing in the next coming months right now. Well, so one of the things that's really drove me to want to even apply to grad school in the first place and create my own system was to get on stages and speak about it. Okay. And I thought
Hmm.
I would need 3 years to go do that and $50,000 and a master's and a bunch of research to go do that. And it turns out, well, the research already existed. And so all I needed to do was get on the right shows to be able to talk about it. And I've put, the marketing systems in place, and I have a contractor that is actually helping me get in a conversation with you right now, right? Like there is a
Hmm.
whole back system and a whole process that is involved to even get here with you right now. And we're just ramping up right now. One of the things that I had to do was, get her out of things manually and shifting her to using an AI and only using her human competency where it needs to be used so that we can
Hmm.
reduce the amount of time and be able to specialize and optimize right now. So that's one of the specific ways. The biggest thing for me is getting this message in front of as many people as possible. Because when you're talking about a paradigm shift, John, and how I'm taking this on 100, like a 180 degree, there's a couple reasons why, right? And one of the reasons that I need to be on as many shows as possible right now is to get even just people even hearing the cultural catalyst name,
Hmm.
right? For me, I'm like, I want cultural catalyst to be part of the linguistics of our culture, right? And 3 years from now, 5 years, however many years from now, when you hear someone say cultural catalyst, it started with me, actually. Like
Hmm.
that came through my client. I realized it fit right into intentional change theory science. And I literally architected a movement based off what the science told me to do. And what we're doing is creating a dream, right? So we need people hear what the term cultural catalyst, because what a cultural catalyst means to you might be very specific to you, right? That's your unique dream. And that's all great, right? And what's so interesting in the last year is like I've been like using the identities, and Tony Robbins talks about identity is the strongest form of transformation, right? Like I'm an athlete, so like I'm at the gym 6 days a week, right? Pushing myself. If I wasn't an athlete, I would not be doing that, right? And so when we take on the cultural catalyst identity and hear it for the first time, we're like, we can actually change our behavior because we actually identify with something that we want to become. And that actually creates the intrinsic motivation for that change process to actually occur and sustain itself. So getting out and sharing the message as much as possible. And the second thing is actually people experiencing me, in this conversation. I'm enough to cause a paradigm shift. Just me being here and me being myself is getting you to shift, right? And getting the people who listen to this conversation to shift. And I had a realization last week. I was on another really high level podcast last week, and I was like, oh my God, like I am role modeling the new type of leadership that I am proposing right now. And I'm creating a group basically for people just like me who want to use their leadership, their influence, their authority to actually change the world and do good. And amazingly get to redesign everything. I'm a systems thinker. So I'm like, we're going to take them all into a room, all these people in like really powerful positions with like lots of capacity and money and like influence. And they're going to get to mastermind with each other and get to solve some of our biggest world problems. Right.
Hmm.
And they actually have the ability to do it. They've already proven their ability to do weird stuff, right? And hard stuff and stuff that is, practically impossible. And the craziest thing is like back in like 1500, there's a guy by the name of Machiavelli, who is a
Mhm.
Renaissance strategist, who basically said the biggest challenge with the creation of a new system is that the old system is designed to protect itself. Okay. So, and basically, it's the pioneer. It's like you don't want your arrows in the back, but quite frankly, we need to pioneer something new right now. For the cultural catalysts who hear and resonate with that aspect, there is like a revolutionary and catalytic side of you, right? That's why we're called cultural catalysts, that we can catalyze culture just through our beingness, right? That's step one. And that's what the consciousness science tells us. And then on top of that, we can actually create new systems and new structures to actually create new culture and have our businesses and our impact and our ability to be a leader do something greater to actually change the world that we live in. And I find that there's absolutely nothing more empowering than that, right? So, you know, the biggest thing is the science says that we have to do that together, like this lone wolf syndrome. And I've been working with CEOs who are like, I want friends, right? That's because it is physiologically and neurologically necessary. Okay. Your
Mhm.
body goes into fight or flight, and you literally, it's like you run out of gas basically when you don't have the right people around you. And again, what got you here won't get you there. And so the peer network is literally designed for these people to come together, to resource each other, to catalyze each other, to be catalyzed. And through their resonance, right? We're have someone on our team who's a master sacred space holder. Like literally, their mastery is in creating coherence in the energetic field itself. Like they're the ones holding the forums. And what happens when you get a group of people into resonance with each other, that's when resource sharing happens. That's when
Mhm.
problem solving happens. That's when their blocks get removed, but not just from an intellectual level, but from the physiology itself. And that's where the sense of belonging comes from. So we're creating a network that is based off the belonging of being a cultural catalyst, and there's nowhere else around like it. And it's been designed specifically for that because there has been no place for cultural catalysts until now. And quite frankly, we're needing it now more than ever. So it's really, I think, a solution for the times that we're in.
Hmm. So I'll tell you something personal. In November, early November, I I went to a men's retreat called Crucible. And from that came two very strong and powerful connections. But it was about 37 men or so that arrived to a kind of a location that was a remote location. The entryway of coming into it wasn't, like signing up at a registration at a hotel for a seminar. It was very intentional, dark. It was no speaking. It was intense the first probably 12 hours of that. And we were all kind of like, the heck did we sign up for? Right. Like
Yeah.
in a way. So it's reminding me that yeah, you're right. I mean, and the groups that we were put in, there was three groups of these 36 men, call it. Um, the experience that we went through, they called it carpet work. And I won't go into the personal side of the stories, but it was talking about something deep inside you that kept on dragging you down. And it could be anything, right? And it was interesting for men, at least. I noticed from 5 years old to about 13 years old, there was this time period of life that every single guy that I saw in the groups and in the other groups dealing with something that they are releasing at that point. And man, I'm getting goosebumps because it was, I'd never experienced something like that. It was very interesting. The way that they let the reins as far as the leaders that were conducting the retreat. Um, they had a very intentional way. There's certain, practices and things. We did outside things, we did inside things, and at the end, we got to know some of the people that were the leadership of it. But boy, what a interesting system. So I'm totally resonating in a way
Yeah,
with what
exactly.
you're saying. Just from a business perspective, and gosh, I feel like this conversation could go an hour and a half of just kind of everything that you're talking about. But to keep it to our audience from a
Yeah,
business perspective,
totally.
um, this group, is there a certain mark yet that you have as far as a price point that they need to get in at? Because you are building a business,
Yeah,
even though it's
totally.
got social and impact and all these things, which are
Yeah.
phenomenal.
Yeah.
But even Tony Robbins, charges 100 grand to sit down with him for 30 minutes, right? So,
Totally.
or
Yeah.
whatever he charges. So,
Yeah.
what is the business price model, if you don't mind going through that, if you decided that already?
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, so the biggest thing is that we're filtering for resonance.
Hmm.
So that's what the science is telling us is that what actually creates change within the social identity group that actually creates the cultural change that we want to make, which is what we want as cultural catalysts, right?
Hmm.
Is that we have to have resonant relationships. So what we're filtering for first and foremost is resonance, right? So we already have some founding members to base it off of. So are these people going to be in resonance with our founding members? Right? Because there is an aspect of yes, is there a business infrastructure and person's business infrastructure, is there going to be shared competency there? Oh, no, that person's a nonprofit founder, that person's a business founder, right? There's different competencies, right? However, there is overlap in that they could help each other, right?
Hmm.
And at the same time, like when you look at the science of consciousness, like the science of consciousness actually measures people's consciousness on a scale from 0 to 1,000. That's a whole nother conversation. I'm happy to have another conversation with you. There's a lot going on here. There's a lot of depth here. And so we want to make sure that we have people in the room who actually have similar competence and similar levels of consciousness, so that they can actually catalyze each other, so that they can actually have epiphanies and all that type of stuff. And one of the things I really want to mention before we go into like, what are the specific markers, because part of it is we're figuring it out. The one thing I know for
Hmm.
certain, and the thing that I, saw in my personal practice is that we have to work with people who are in what's called systemic critical leveraged positions. Okay. So, for example, that multi-business founder, by impacting him, I impacted hundreds of people just through him, right?
Hmm.
Very little amount of time I had to give him, but it was transformative him in every single area of his life, right? And the same thing goes true for people who are in high positions of influence or authority, right? His other founder, she's got over 100 people in her working for her in her ecosystem, thousands of people that she serves, right? Tony Robbins, major systemic critical leverage point, right? So we're searching for people who are in positions to actually make impact and that the final decision comes to them. Because I've worked with COOs, I've worked with CFOs and all that type of stuff. And ultimately, oftentimes it comes down to the founder, right? And
Hmm.
there's a reason why. So that person is the person that's in the critical systemic leverage position to be able to make the most change. So we're filtering for, are you that? Are you a cultural catalyst? What is your desired outcome? What is your contribution that you're wanting to make as a cultural catalyst? And the other thing we're filtering for is what is your level of leadership? Based off Maxwell's leadership theory, right? Level 1 through 5. I've worked with an 8-figure founder who's received over $65 million in funding, and his leadership level, questionable, right? He might
Hmm.
not be operating at a level that he really needs to be able to create the results that he needs to be able to create for what it is that the investors are wanting from him. And so we're starting with people who are already at level 4 or level 5 leadership, because part of, what we're doing with the scaling science, what the scaling science is telling us is that to scale, it has to be greater than ourselves. And part of that, when we start having the conversation of it being greater than ourselves, that brings up a conversation of legacy, right? And the people that are
Hmm.
around us who are interested in this, they are interested in legacy. And to actually create a legacy, it has to be greater than themselves. And one of the questions that I propose in our masterclass is like, what is the culture you are leaving behind?
Hmm. Yeah, I will say, as an author now, as of October, when we launched my book, it's been interesting because I've had people on the podcast from London to wherever, and to know that your book, and it's been, in the U.S. Library of Congress, and my 14-year-old read it, and the feeling that you have when you read a book or when you write a book and you go through that journey, and then now being able to share with yourself, if you haven't written a book, like I could say, hey, you should write a book, or these people that you're influencing and you're putting into this cohort to write a book. That's kind of the way I think of it, as something of a legacy moment, right? To me, the book is one of the pieces of my legacy, right?
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting 150, 300 years from now if somebody picks it up and reads or whatever. So it did leave that kind of burned, etched opportunity in my heart and my mind.
Yeah.
So it's really cool that you put it that way. So well, look, I would say, from a Go4CEO mindset, right? Operations, scaling, marketing, sales, branding, consulting, right? All the things that really are of a business. And you're right. I mean, a six-figure business is much different than an eight-figure one. Not to skip the seven-figure, but it's
Yeah,
interesting. I don't know if you know this, but only 9-ish% of businesses in America ever get to seven figures. So, the millions and millions of LLCs and incorporations and S corps and C corps that are founded never even get to I'm sorry, 9%, seven figures, right? So seven figure of revenue, 9% of them do that, right? Throughout time. So, it's interesting. I'm very curious. We should definitely have you back and bring you into this ecosystem and be a part of it. And I was already thinking, my mind wandered just for a second of kind of, do you have a brand right now that's already been kind of etched? Like, meaning like, not to put a stamp on, but like a logo or anything that you've created for Cultural Catalyst yet? Because I was imagining these two C's, like a really cool thing to wear, right? To have kind of
exactly.
like a tribe of people that are wearing Cultural Catalyst stuff, like I don't know, just something like that. So,
You're
uh,
right on, and it's funny too. One of my longtime clients, she's been getting downloads for years about different things to put on t-shirts. Okay.
mm,
And I'm like, oh, perfect. We could just put the Cultural Catalyst title on it and then just like send it out automatically. It makes it so easy. And I think what you're speaking to is like there's something catchy about the Cultural Catalyst name, right?
mm,
You can sense already that it's going to catch, right? It's speaking to the heart of humanity in a way that's like speaking to the heart of a moment. It's really a tipping point, like, whether it be an intentional change theory or even, Charlie Kirk's tipping point USA this past year,
mm,
right? Like there's a tipping point that we're in the process of right now. And just through owning that fact that I'm a cultural catalyst can actually start to make that change happen. And when it comes to a logo and that type of stuff right now, we have something, but part of it is like the cultural catalyst. It's an identity.
mm,
And I was talking to my business partner this morning, and she was saying that it was like it's a dream. And so for me, I'm not able to put it into a logo yet. We've got some like base level versions at the moment, but what Cultural Catalyst is for each and every one of us is unique. And that's part of what we do in our masterclass. We have people prospect into the future using an actual exercise from Richard's book that has you prospect into the future of like, what is your vision? What is your impact? What are your purpose? What are your
mm.
values as a cultural catalyst? Right? Because that frame can really change what it is that you see and you feel and the direction and the route that you go in your life. And it is specifically designed for that. We are designing a system to actually create positive exponential cultural change. And so whether you're a person in a systemic critical leverage position or not, you can actually start being that change now just by saying you're a cultural catalyst. And when you say you're a cultural catalyst, you meet someone out and they're like, wait a second, so am I. Right? That's just like you're like a New York Giants fan, like automatic resonance. And
Mm.
when we band together over the shared vision of being a cultural catalyst, we can actually catalyze each other and actualize this version of reality and the way that we live in a way that is really just dreamlike at the moment. But we have access to it when we open up that portal.
I love it. I love it. All right. Well, I could, like I said, go an hour and a half or two with you. Really love what we're talking about. A little bit different than what our podcasts usually are, but I love it because these are different topics that we need to be talking about. And you've said a lot of great stuff. So the way that we end our podcast is typically CEO. So it's client experience, from the cultural catalyst standpoint and what the value proposition is for someone to come into your ecosystem and do business with you as a
Yeah.
client. Then E for engagement, I'll walk you through that, and then O for operational excellence. But if we start with the top, C for client experience,
Yeah.
what would you say is maybe 30, 60 seconds of what you envision right now being a client experience for someone doing business with Cultural Catalyst?
They're actually the biggest thing that people will take away from their client experience of being a cultural catalyst is actually being in resonant catalytic relationships with other cultural catalysts that help them actualize their potential as a cultural catalyst and leaving the culture that they want to leave behind, not alone, but together with people that they can actually have fun and make it sustainable with.
All right, I love you. Nailed that one. All right, so E for engagement. So Jaclyn, I love to hear from founders, CEOs, entrepreneurs that I've had on this podcast, hundreds of them.
Yeah.
And each one of them gives me always a little bit different way that they like to engage. So engagement is, are you a dinner person? Do you like to go to events? Are you a bring everybody to a retreat person? Do you like one-on-one? Do you like to just go get coffee with someone? How do people or how should people engage with you? And what's your best way to be your best self in
Yeah.
engaging?
So for me, the best way to for people to engage me is just to be around me while I'm speaking. Like I light up over public speaking. And so, we have a weekly master class that people can sign up for at culturalcontribution.com, where they actually get to be around the energy that I'm emitting, and actually get to, vision into that future of a cultural catalyst and actually go through a transformational experience that actually creates a tipping point for them to start in that change process. And the biggest thing, it's for me, one of the transformations that I went through in the last year as we've been launching this is I've been letting go of my one-on-one work and I've been stepping into CEO. So that means I do not meet with everybody one-on-one anymore. We will for a certain capacity in regards to our container, but that's not going to be that way long term. So people want to address me and come in relationship with me directly. The best way to do that is through culturalcontribution.com.
Okay, awesome. And the last one is operational excellence, right? We didn't touch much on this, but as you form this, are you using HubSpot as a landing place for your clients? Are you,
Yeah.
Lightspeed VT, or what tools are you using? AI, what's kind of the operational side of Cultural Catalyst and from the framework of the business? Anything
Yeah.
that you would share, or are you old school? Like, hey, I'm using Excel
Yeah.
spreadsheets and pen
Totally.
and paper. So.
So, one of the things I want to address into the operational side of the business is when I was given Ben's book, my partner and I agreed to 10x 3 times. Okay.
Mhm.
So to actually learn the framework and get it into our bodies. And one of the things that I got to sit down and do is actually see what do we need to focus on at each stage of every 10x, right? So this current stage is going to be filling the container consistently. Second stage is delivery optimization. Third stage is multiplication of licensing and all that type of stuff. And so from an operational standpoint, the biggest thing for me in this, as we're filling the container with our founding members who are actually getting to be with us on the ground floor and help us create this thing, is that we have direct relationships with them. So we have my business partner is in charge of customer success, right? And our other partner who's, the one holding the space, the master, literally, she's a master at what she does. Doing something for over 20 years. We're directly engaging with each other and consistently, as well as with our clients directly, to make sure that we are providing the most exceptional experience for them as possible. Because one of the things is like we're integrating a lot of science to be able to create this thing right now. So we actually need direct feedback. And it's a relational dynamic that we have with our members, not just a transactional dynamic that we have with them, because they are actually the ones who are helping build this with us and helping us create the conditions for exponential cultural change. So at the moment, we're old school. We don't want to systematize something before we need to. We actually need to have one real conversations with them, both in person and online, to make sure that we are creating the most optimal conditions for resonance to occur and for fractal change to occur.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. Awesome. Well, hey, let's tell everybody, the Growth Show community. By the way, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, subscribe to the channel. Pick up the book on Amazon, the 4A Formula, Untangle Any Challenge, and Think Like a CEO. Got great CEO founders like Jaclyn, and examples of that, and my own stories in there. Tell people how to get a hold of you. What's the best way to interact and start to learn more about Cultural Catalyst or a
Yeah.
website?
Well, I just actually want to speak directly to the story that you shared, which is like you went to one mastermind where they were all telling you about like operate like OES, like the operating system under a business. And then you went to another retreat that was like you walked out with real friends, right? What is the
Hmm.
difference between those, right? One is focused on like relational resonance and transformation, and one is purely focused on the intellect, right? And I will say the mind is really bad at fulfillment, okay? It knows how you to get from point A to point B, but it doesn't necessarily know how to make you happy. And so what we're doing with the Cultural Catalyst Network is we're creating an environment for people who identify as cultural catalysts to come together to have real relationships with each other. And that's where the transformation and the fractal change actually happens. So if people want that, if they are tired of interacting with their AIs and with digital everything all the time, and they want real relationships and they want to change the world, great. We've got a place for you. The next step in that process is to come to our masterclass at culturalcontribution.com.
Culturalcontribution.com.
Yep.
Awesome. Awesome, Jaclyn. Well, hey, thank you so much for being a part of the GO4CEO channel. And we're looking forward to it. I'm definitely gonna reach back out. I think in the next 6 to 18 months, let's figure out a way to get you back on
Right.
and talk about what's going on. And I'd love to see that first cohort and connect on LinkedIn and all that type of stuff as well. So,
Right.
thank you so much. And let's keep it rolling. I think you have
Sounds good.
something that you've come upon, and I'm super excited about where you are headed with cultural catalysts. So, thank you.
Thanks so much for having me.